The sky was fire. Through the cracked concrete slits of Earth's last bunker, Commander Elias Voss watched the heavens split open. The night had been stolen, replaced by the hellish glow of burning atmosphere, streaking debris, and the artificial sunbursts of orbital bombardment. The enemy had arrived. Again. For 20 years, the last survivors of Earth had burrowed beneath the charred bones of their once great cities. They had become ghosts in the ruins, scavengers in the dark, rats in the tunnels. And the universe had declared them extinct. The Xyra Dominion, the great architects of humanity's downfall, had reduced their home to a smouldering wasteland, ensuring no one could rise from the ashes. But somehow, humanity had survived. The warning had come hours ago, an intercepted transmission, a cruel declaration from the enemy. This is your final night. You should not exist. Tomorrow, your species is legend. Now Voss stood still as the bunker trembled under the weight of incoming destruction. Dust rained from the ceiling. Monitors flickered. The command center was packed with soldiers, engineers, and the last dregs of the old world's brilliance. Their faces, streaked with sweat and soot, were unreadable, except for their eyes. Not fear, not despair. Something else. Voss exhaled slowly. "They think this is the end," he murmured, voice steady as he turned to his second-in-command lieutenant, Sarai Navarro. "They still don't understand what happens when you corner a species that refuses to die." Navarro's smirk was sharp. Their mistake. Above them, Xyra warships filled the stratosphere, their sleek obsidian hulls blotting out what little remained of Earth's sky. Hundreds of them, poised to unleash the final purge. Their leaders believed they were hammering the last nail in humanity's coffin. They didn't know that coffin was wired to explode. In the depths of the bunker, the countdown had already begun. A pulse weapon, years in the making, hidden beneath the ruins of a once great city, waiting for this moment. Voss turned back to the monitors, watching the enemy ships descend. His voice was calm, absolute. "Let them come." The command center pulsed with electric tension. In the heart of Earth's last bunker, Ironhold, monitors flickered with real-time tactical readouts. Rows of engineers, soldiers, and data analysts worked in perfect synchrony, their faces illuminated by the cold glow of war maps and targeting systems. Commander Elias Voss stood at the center of it all, watching as the Xyra fleet aligned itself in the skies above, preparing for the final execution. His hands were steady behind his back, his gaze unwavering. This wasn't desperation, this wasn't defiance, this was inevitability. "Confirm pulse weapon status," Voss said, his voice cutting through the static-laced chatter. "Online," came the immediate response from Chief Engineer Malachi Rowe. His hands danced across a console as he relayed final diagnostics. 5 minutes until full charge. The pulse will be ready before their orbital batteries reach full discharge sequence. 5 minutes. That was the gap between extinction and vengeance. Lieutenant Sarai Navarro, the sharp-eyed strategist at Voss's side, studied the overhead holographic display. The Xyra had come in force, 6 dreadnoughts, 24 escort cruisers, and swarms of strikecraft moving into attack formations. Their war doctrine was simple: overwhelming force, total annihilation. "They're not even deploying ground troops," Navarro muttered, shaking her head. "They're treating us like an infection to be sterilized, a quick burn, no survivors." Voss almost smiled. That arrogance would be their undoing. "Send the trigger." "Code to Sentinel-9, he ordered. Across the bunker, an encrypted transmission was sent to an old, forgotten satellite, one of humanity's last ghosts in orbit. The Xyra had ignored it, assuming it was another dead relic of the war, but it had not been forgotten by those who survived. "Trigger code confirmed," a technician called out. "Satellite is aligning for pulse delivery." Voss exhaled, nodding. "The trap was set, but survival wasn't just about weapons. "All bunker personnel, prepare for impact," he said over the intercom. "The Xyra think they're erasing us tonight. Let's show them what a cornered species is willing to do." Across Ironhold, soldiers loaded weapons, technicians made final calibrations, and medics stood ready for the storm about to break over them. The Xyra were coming, and the last humans on Earth were ready. A low, thunderous boom rippled through the bunker, shaking dust loose from the ceiling. It wasn't the impact of an explosion. It was the air itself, vibrating under the force of the Xyra fleet's planetary bombardment sequence coming online. The countdown had begun. Commander Elias Voss barely flinched. His focus remained locked on the tactical display, where the enemy formation was tightening, drawing power from their dreadnoughts. The Xyra would start with atmospheric compression bombardments, superheating the air until the ground itself became a scalding wasteland. 4 minutes until full pulse charge, Chief Engineer Malachi Rowe announced, his voice steady despite the rising tension. "Satellites are aligned, no interference detected." 4 minutes, Lieutenant Sarai Navarro stood beside Voss, arms crossed, eyes flicking between the monitors and the trembling ceiling. "They still don't know, do they?" she asked, her voice low. "They will," Voss replied, but the Xyra weren't going to sit idle. A new alert flashed across the main screen. Enemy strike craft detaching from the main fleet, streaking toward the surface. Their intent was obvious, a preemptive kinetic sweep to eliminate any remaining resistance before the bombardment completed its work. "Xyra strike teams inbound," a technician called. 200-plus vessels, rapid descent vectors. "Uta, 1 minute," Navarro swore under her breath. "They're deploying gunships now. They never send troops in before an orbital sweep." "They're adapting," Voss said. "They know we're hiding something. That complicated things. The pulse weapon was designed to disable their fleet, not hold off a direct ground assault. If those strike teams breached the bunker before the weapon fired, the last remnants of humanity would be crushed beneath the weight of Xyra shock troopers." "Scramble Havoc teams to upper defenses," Voss ordered, turning to the ops officers. "We stall them, we bleed them. They don't get inside before we fire that pulse." "Understood," came the responses. In the halls of Ironhold, sirens blared. Armored doors slammed shut as defense teams scrambled into position. Automated turrets activated, scanning the skies. The bunker's anti-air emplacements, long silent, rotated skyward. Humanity's last guns, old but deadly, locked onto the incoming Xyra forces. Navarro pulled up a tactical overlay of the battlefield. "If they breach, it's over." "They won't," Voss said, turning toward the massive blast doors ceiling. The bunker's entrance. He tightened his grip on his sidearm. Outside, the sky burned. Inside, the last survivors of Earth prepared for war. The first explosion shattered the night. A fireball erupted above Ironhold's surface defenses as the Xyra gunships entered the atmosphere, their hulls glowing from re-entry. They moved in tight, disciplined formations, black daggers cutting through the burning sky. Streams of plasma fire rained down, carving molten scars into the earth. Inside the bunker, the command center shook violently. A monitor flickered, replaced by a single flashing alert. "Defense barrier compromised. They're hitting the outer perimeter hard," Navarro reported, voice sharp over the rising cacophony of war. "Auto turrets are holding, but those gunships are packing heavy suppression payloads." "Hold them as long as possible," Voss said, his voice like iron. "If they breach the inner gates before the pulse fires, we lose everything." The underground fortress vibrated with the force of artillery fire as Havoc teams, elite strike units hardened by years of surviving extinction, moved into defensive positions. They wore scavenged armor, customized and reinforced with whatever materials they could salvage from Earth's ruins. Their weapons weren't just human-made. Many carried repurposed Xyra tech, ripped from the corpses of fallen invaders, a direct Comlink crackled to life. Havoc 1 to command. We've got eyes on incoming ground units, drop pods, dozens of them. Voss exchanged a glance with Navarro. This wasn't a surgical strike anymore. The Xyra weren't just sweeping the surface, they were committing troops. They're desperate, Navarro muttered. They wouldn't risk sending soldiers down unless they knew something was wrong. Then let's make them regret it, Voss said, activating the external speakers. His voice boomed across the battlefield. Navarro didn't hesitate. She launched a concussion grenade into the bulk of the advancing squad. The explosion sent shockwaves through the hallway, tearing limbs and plating apart. But for every alien that fell, more surged forward. The Xyra were relentless. A towering enforcer charged through the smoke. A commander unit, twice the size of the others, its armor reinforced with thick, organic plating. It let out a sharp, clicking snarl before lunging. Voss barely had time to move before it struck. The impact sent him sprawling, his rifle skidding across the floor. The Xyra commander pinned him down, its razor-edged forearm blade slicing toward his throat. Bang! Navarro's sidearm cracked, the shot punching through the alien's eye socket. It spasmed once before collapsing, lifeless. She offered Voss a hand. "Get up, we're not done." Voss grabbed his rifle, breathing hard. "Not even close." Another explosion rattled the bunker, this time from above. "Commander," Rose's voice blasted over the comms. "The pulse is ready. We need final confirmation." "To fire," Voss clicked his comm. "Do it." Rose slammed the final trigger sequence. Above, in orbit, Sentinel-9 hummed to life. The ancient satellite, long ignored, long forgotten, unleashed a pulse of pure, concentrated electromagnetic fury. The sky turned white. Every Xyra warship in orbit flickered. Their hulls, once indestructible, shuddered. The energy ripple cascaded across their fleet, frying circuits, shutting down propulsion, sending their ships tumbling like dying stars. On the battlefield, the Xyra soldiers froze. Their neural-linked weapons shut down mid-fire, their armor locked up, their biosensors went blind, and in that moment, humanity struck back. Silence. For the first time in hours, the battlefield was still. The Xyra warships hung dead in the sky, drifting like corpses in zero gravity. Some had lost power entirely, their engines sputtering before dragging them into the pull of Earth's gravity. They fell like meteors, burning as they spiraled downward, metal coffins for the thousands of invaders still trapped inside. On the ground, the once relentless alien soldiers stood motionless, their weapons inert, their armor frozen. The pulse had shut down their neural systems, severing their link to command. For the first time in their species' history, they were blind, and humanity did not hesitate. Across the battlefield, Havoc teams surged forward. What had once been an impossible stand had become a massacre. Soldiers emptied magazines into defenseless. Enemies' blades and boots finishing what bullets could not. The sky, once filled with plasma fire, now echoed with the guttural screams of dying Xyra. Voss pulled himself to his feet, wiping the blood from his forehead. Navarro stood beside him, breathing hard, her rifle still raised. "It worked," she muttered. "It actually worked." Voss watched as one of the massive Xyra dreadnoughts broke apart in orbit, its wreckage streaking across the atmosphere like a dying star. No, he thought, it didn't just work. It was a reckoning. A transmission crackled to life in his earpiece. "Commander Voss, this is Sentinel-9. We are receiving multiple distress signals from Xyra command ships. They are requesting terms of surrender. Surrender. For 2 decades, the Xyra had never considered the possibility. They had come as conquerors, as exterminators. Now, with their fleets crippled and their soldiers slaughtered, they faced the unthinkable. Navarro exhaled, a grin cutting across her dirt-streaked face. "I say we tell them to go to hell." Voss didn't smile. He stepped over the body of a fallen Xyra warrior, staring into its lifeless black eyes. "No," he said. "Not yet." He activated his comm, his voice carrying across all surviving frequencies. "This is Commander Elias Voss of the Terran Remnant. You came to finish what you started. Now you beg for mercy?" He let the silence stretch, the weight of the moment, pressing down on every listening ear. "You have two options. Abandon your fleets, leave our system and never return. Or watch your homeworlds burn as ours did." A long pause. "Then we understand." Voss's hand curled into a fist. "Good." Above them, the Xyra fleet, what remained of it, began to retreat. The war for Earth was over, but humanity's war for vengeance had just begun. The fires burned for days. The wreckage of Xyra warships littered the landscape, twisted metal skeletons of what was once an unstoppable armada. Their dead lay in the streets, their once impervious bodies now reduced to nothing more than corpses beneath the boots of the victors. For the first time in 20 years, the sky over Earth was clear. Voss stood atop the ruined gates of Ironhold, watching as the survivors emerged from the bunker. Engineers, medics, soldiers, every last remnant of the human race who had clawed their way through extinction. They stared at the remains of their would-be executioners, breathing in air that, for the first time in 2 decades, did not carry the scent of defeat. Navarro approached, her rifle slung over her shoulder. "They're really gone," she muttered, as if saying it aloud would make it real. "They're retreating," Voss corrected. "Gone is something we'll make sure of later." She smirked. "So what now? We let them run?" Voss didn't answer immediately. He watched the sky, the last few Xyra ships vanishing beyond the atmosphere, heading toward the edge of the system. Somewhere out there, their empire was still intact. Their core world still thrived, untouched by the hell they had unleashed upon humanity. And now, for the first time, humanity had a choice. Survival was no longer the only goal. "We take the fight to them," Voss finally said. His voice was steady, certain. "We let them feel what it's like to watch their worlds burn." Navarro exhaled sharply. "You really think we have a chance out there?" Voss turned to her, eyes cold, determined. "We weren't supposed to have a chance here." He gestured at the ruins around them, the battlefield they had just turned into a graveyard for an empire. "And yet, here we stand. For 20 years, humanity had been fighting to survive. Now it was time for something else. Retribution. Far above, the first of the captured Xyra ships powered up, now under human control. The survivors of Earth were no longer the hunted. They were the storm, and the galaxy would learn what it meant to make an enemy of humanity. The end, or just the beginning,